Next, we'll look at finding the next property and repeating the process. So first of all, valuations, bank valuations, are central to a capital growth strategy. Houses and townhouses are common enough for accurate bank valuations, usually with a range of around 3% plus or minus. New growth suburbs may be harder to value due to scarce housing and the lack of comparable sales data. Ideally, you want to revalue the property every 6 to 12 months if the market is rising. And once you receive a favourable valuation, you realise you're ready to expand. So we want to once again have a look at where the next city is in its property growth cycle. So once again, the best place to buy is at the start of recovery and rising market sections of the property cycle. We want to maximize the short-term, medium-term, and long-term growth potential on the second property, just as we did on the first property. And once again, we'll be avoiding the peak of market and bottom of market regions. And we will just avoid the bottom of market in general, as the prices can stall there for an extended period of time. We want to maximize short-term growth as well as medium-term and long-term. So we'll look at start of recovery and rising market. And we want to diversify across Australia. You want to buy your second property in a different city or town to your first property. The second city should have low correlation to the first city, and I'll run through what that means on the next slide. The second city should be at the start of recovery or rising market section on its property clock and meet the criteria outlined in the map process for the right market. Diversifying cities means you can buy near the bottom of the market in the second city rather than the peak of the market in the first city. You want to be able to protect your assets from an economic shock that affects one city or one state. And you want to be able to benefit from a boom that happens in either city. You want to smooth out the returns of your portfolio. So a boom in one city could offset a potential bust or a lull in the market in another. So when it comes to diversifying your portfolio, it's basically the process of allocating capital in a way that reduces the exposure of the portfolio to one particular set of risks. You can diversify your portfolio by investing across different geographical regions, so you are not susceptible to the performance or underperformance of one region. This will also lower the volatility of your portfolio overall. Now, correlation is the degree to which two variables are linearly related. For example, height and weight are related. Taller people tend to be heavier than shorter people. Therefore, height and weight are positively correlated. But keep in mind, correlation does not imply causation. We'll have a look at the strength of the relationship when it comes to correlation. So a perfect positive correlation has a correlation coefficient of exactly 1. A perfect negative correlation has a correlation coefficient of exactly -1. A 0 value for the correlation coefficient implies no relationship between the two variables whatsoever. And on the table on the right of the screen, we can see a small chart that's explaining the strength of the relationship. Between 0 to 0.3, there's no relationship or a very weak relationship between two inputs. 0.3 to 0.5 is a weak relationship. 0.5 to 0.7 is a moderate relationship. Anything above 0.7 will imply a strong relationship. So the major capitals real estate markets have generally amongst each other a moderate correlation near 0.5, with some notable exceptions. Melbourne and Sydney correlate quite strongly, 0.7862. Brisbane and Adelaide also correlate quite strongly at 0.8479. You would expect some degree of correlation across Australia, as all the real estate values are affected by the same national inflation rates, cash rates, even exchange rates, the availability of credit, tax policies, and federal policies in general, amongst many, many other macroeconomic variables. And here's a quick correlation example, so you know how to use this information. So I'm following a capital growth strategy in the big four cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth. And I own one property in Sydney already, which was purchased 2 years ago. This property has performed well, achieving 8% growth per annum. Based on market research, I feel that Melbourne and Brisbane are the most likely to deliver the highest returns over the next 4 years. That's why I have them on the property clock at the start of recovery to rising market sections. Now, if returns between Melbourne and Brisbane are expected to be identical, which city should I invest in to reduce risk or volatility in the portfolio overall? Now, to answer that question, so first point, we'll avoid Perth. As it is a declining market, we won't even be looking at that market to invest in either way. We will avoid Sydney in order to diversify. If you have a look at the matrix, Sydney correlates perfectly with Sydney, so we'll avoid Sydney. Melbourne correlates very highly to the Sydney market, as discussed earlier, but Brisbane does correlate to a lesser degree at 0.5809 to Sydney. So if you want to reduce risk in the portfolio, you'd select Brisbane due to the lower correlation to Sydney and take advantage of the starter recovery and rising market stages in their property cycle.